This week I'm joined by Professor Emmeline Taylor, and we're going to be reflecting upon a meeting around security officers, guards, and the relevance of training and how retailers were getting the best out of their security guarding provision. Well, look, we had a meeting, like 2 weeks ago or so, and the theme was around security guards, and we'll come on to say whether they should be security guards or security officers, but I think we had about 70 odd people there. It was a follow-on from a previous meeting about 6 months earlier where we learned that actually a lot of retailers were saying, 40% of retailers were saying they did not provide extra training for their security officers. Did not. And so we had an academic, Professor Martin Gill, and then we had one of the retailers share how they went about training their security officers. And there was quite an extensive program delivering some pretty remarkable results. And then we had a really great discussion, and you were part of that. And so you sat through it all, and I saw you writing copious notes. But as you distill those down in your own version of ChatGPT, what were the key findings that you thought those who could not attend should take away and think about?
I think what was really fascinating, we started with the premise that offenders still believe that security officers, not guards, are the number one concern when they're targeting a store. But it's not just a case of putting a uniformed officer at the front of the store, it's what they do. And this came through very strongly from the retailers as well, that you have to invest in these security officers. You have to integrate them into the team. And so I think that was the real crux of it. How do you integrate them? How do you make them feel loved, I guess? And so training really became quite a big theme here. Do you do it internally? Do you have external training? What equipment do you give these officers? And some really great insights, I think, about some of the techniques that retailers are using to enhance that.
Yeah, as you say, often they don't really get given a sort of a description of what a good job looks like. Just go and stand there and, see what happens, and stop wrong-uns. You're absolutely right. I think that did come through loud and clear. They need to be part of the team and need to feel supported.
Yeah, definitely. And there was also a lot of discussion as well around the different roles that security officers can play. So whether they're tactical and undercover, whether they do meet and greet people as they come into the store, whether they're expected to try and detain people. There was a real variation. Are they mobile, or are they always allocated the same store where they get to know the team? So yeah, some real sort of different approaches there.
Well, this is so critical as well, Emily, because often the people making decisions about employing security officers are the procurement team, and I'm not sure and ever convinced that procurement team understand these subtleties. When what they're looking to do is get as many hours at the lowest price, and some of these subtleties, these trainings, it's different. It's not necessarily easy to boil it down to a commodity, which is what I suppose most.
I think you're absolutely right. We so often still hear about guarding just talked about in terms of hours rather than capabilities, and I think perhaps shifting the dial on that is really important.
Yeah. What else did you pick up on?
Well, we had quite a lengthy debate. Somebody said that you can't train your way out of a problem. And we talked about this at length, whether you can, whether you can't, whether it's the quality, of that appointment. And yeah, there was really mixed feelings about this. What did you take away from that statement?
Well, I think it's going back to the point about what do you need security guards or security officers for? What's their role? What's their work? What's their way in which they interact with the stores and help to make stores safer? And that's what I think, you can't just do that with a security officer. There needs to be lots more. There needs to be a culture, there needs to be design of the layout of the store, so many things. So you can't just sort of apply security officer and hope that your safety suddenly improves or your shrink goes down. So I think that's what Martin was saying about that. Is that you need to have a strategy first, and then a security officer can then support that strategy in the way that you think most appropriate. That's what I took away.
Yeah, definitely. And we also had some conversations sort of beyond sort of store layout and, those aspects around the equipment that security officers are now given. And again, there's a huge amount of variance, whether they have headsets, whether they're stood at a podium with a computer, do they have body worn cameras? So again, it comes down to that investment and then, of course, the training to be able to use that equipment to the most effective way.
Yeah, we went, and then the case study was really good around the benefits of training. I mean, they had some quite interesting metrics around just the, I mean, on the negative side, that fewer complaints about security officers, which had virtually disappeared for this. But they were also looking at sort of the number of reduction in preventable incidents. They also had a way of measuring engagement around some of the internal tools, and one particularly all about feedback. But they also, I think, a really key metric was about retention. Again,
Yeah,
what you don't want
definitely.
is the same security or different security officer every single day in a
Yeah.
store. And so, when you can reduce retention or improve retention, I should say, you can get much better results rather than random and even sort of like subcontracted security officers.
Definitely. And I think that's where that investment in the individual really comes in, doesn't it? And show that you want to integrate them and see them as part of the solution rather than just this add-on, which I think so often they're viewed as almost, the one to take the punches when things get a bit nasty. I think we need to sort of move away from that view of what a security officer's role actually is.
Yeah, and I love the comment from one of the retailers at the end, the sort of saying, when done well, and it goes back to your original point, when done well, security officers, are the key to making those stores safer. And when done well, as you say, means they're integrated, they're trained, they know how to deal with customer service, they know how to deal with all the equipment, that is often put on these products, so they know that, the full scenario, what goes wrong, and they just know the store. And I think they're right. They know the bad ones, they know the sort of that prolific offenders. So that role of a great security officer, when done well, is possibly the number one deterrent for offenders. Pretty powerful stuff.
Very powerful, definitely.
And we do lose sight of it. But they've certainly got more equipment. I mean, that's something that sort of we talked about, the body worn cameras coming up, the uniforms coming up. We had some Americans on there. I think guns are.
Well, I mean, that's interesting, isn't it? Because, in the US, there's a lot of off-duty police officers are then recruited as security guards. You have armed ones or pepper spray. There's a real sort of differentiation there, I think, between the powers perhaps that security officers have in the UK, which essentially is like any citizen. They can do a citizen's arrest, but they don't have anything additional. And I wonder if, are we going to move towards a bit more of a universal model around what those powers can be as we move more into private security?
Yeah, and we've seen some interesting work, didn't we, earlier in the year around community guards and how do you involve the community? And there's been several discussions around that. And, as opposed to a sort of, in the case of America, you've got an off-duty policeman, which, again, they're not necessarily trained in customer service last time I looked. But
a very different type of customer, I think they typically do.
Yes, let alone knowing the community and all the rest of it. But well, that's fascinating. So thank you so much for taking the time to write down those notes, for supporting that meeting. I know that security guards will keep on saying it. I need to be it should be a pound for every time.
We're going to fine you every time you say guards, I think.
Yes, security officers will look at again at what innovations are taking place around the business model, around the thinking, around the training, and that'll be in June 2025. So it's a great an area for collaboration and joint sharing of knowledge.
As always, thanks, Colin.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Well, that's all we have time for this week. Thank you for joining us, and thanks to all the ECR Retail Loss community for the sharing of their knowledge, their research and latest learnings that ensure that we become truly a global platform for learning. My name is Colin Peacock. This is the Sell More and Lose Less podcast, and if you liked it, please subscribe so you automatically get all future episodes. And also, if you think your colleagues and friends might also like it, please ask them to follow ECR Retail Loss on LinkedIn and tune in to our next podcasts. If you didn't like it, then let us know and we'll try and fix it. Either way, see you next time. Thank you again.